Karen Whitmore clutched the certified letter in her perfectly manicured hands, her face flushing crimson as she read the words that would change everything. Standing on the marble steps of her $2.3 million McMansion in Sunset Ridge Estates, she felt her world tilt sideways. "What do you mean trespassing?" she shrieked into her phone, her voice carrying across the pristine lawns of the gated community. On the other end, her lawyer's voice was carefully neutral. "Karen, I'm reading the documents now. It appears your entire subdivision, every house, every street, every common area, sits on land that belongs to someone else. The HOA never actually owned the property." Karen's grip tightened on the phone. As president of the Sunset Ridge HOA for the past 8 years, she'd ruled this community with an iron fist wrapped in a perfectly pressed velvet glove. She'd issued 847 violation notices, foreclosed on 3 homes, and made grown men cry over mailbox colors. The idea that someone could challenge her authority was incomprehensible. "That's impossible," she hissed, pacing across her imported Italian tile. "I've seen the deed. The developer transferred ownership to the HOA in 2003. "Well, there's a problem with that. The developer didn't own the land either. According to these documents, it's part of a 500-acre ranch that's been in the Rodriguez family since 1887. They've been trying to contact the HOA for years about a lease agreement." Karen's blood ran cold. She remembered those letters, dozens of them over the years, all bearing the letterhead Rodriguez Ranch LLC. She'd dismissed them as scams, tossing them in the trash without a second thought. After all, who would believe some random family-owned prime real estate worth over $100 million? "But we've been paying property taxes," she protested, "weekly, on improvements only. The land itself was never transferred." "Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. Technically, everyone in your community is trespassing. The ranch has the legal right to demand immediate evacuation." Through her floor-to-ceiling windows, Karen watched her neighbor, Ted Morrison, meticulously edging his lawn with military precision. The Hendersons were washing their Tesla in the driveway, their twins playing hopscotch on the sidewalk. These people weren't just homeowners, they were her subjects, her responsibility, her empire. "There has to be something we can do," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I am not losing my community to some farmer." "Actually, Mrs. Whitmore, there's a meeting tomorrow. Miguel Rodriguez wants to discuss terms. Perhaps you could—" "Terms?" Karen's voice rose to a shriek again. "I don't negotiate with extortionists." She hung up and stared at the letter again. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, was a phone number and a simple message. "Call me. We need to talk. Miguel Rodriguez." Karen crumpled the letter and threw it across her living room. She'd built her reputation on never backing down, never showing weakness. She wasn't about to start now. But as she looked out at her kingdom, a small seed of doubt began to sprout in her chest. Karen's BMW X7 kicked up a cloud of dust as she turned onto the dirt road leading to Rodriguez Ranch. She'd expected some rundown farmhouse with peeling paint and rusted farm equipment. Instead, she found herself driving through rolling hills dotted with grazing cattle, past a pristine stable complex, and toward a sprawling adobe-style house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. "This can't be right," she muttered, checking her GPS again. A man in his 50s emerged from the house as she parked. Miguel Rodriguez wore worn jeans and a clean flannel shirt, his boots scuffed but well-maintained. He looked exactly like what Karen expected, a simple rancher who'd gotten lucky with some old paperwork. "Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for coming," Miguel said, extending his hand. Karen barely touched it, her nose wrinkling at the calluses. "Let's get one thing straight," Karen began, not bothering with pleasantries. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but my community isn't going anywhere. We have rights." Miguel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "Please come inside. I have some things to show you." The interior of the house was nothing like Karen expected. Original hardwood floors gleamed under modern light fixtures, and the walls were lined with what looked like expensive artwork. Family photos dating back generations covered a massive mantelpiece, and through the windows she could see solar panels glinting on the barn roofs. Coffee? Miguel offered, gesturing to a leather chair that probably cost more than most people's cars. I don't have time for hospitality, Karen snapped, remaining standing. I want to see these supposed documents. Miguel walked to an antique desk and pulled out a thick folder. My great-great-grandfather, Joaquin Rodriguez, bought this land in 1887. Here's the original deed, recorded with the county. He handed her a carefully preserved document. Karen squinted at the faded ink and official seals. It looked legitimate, but that didn't mean anything. Anyone can forge old papers. You're right, Miguel said calmly. That's why I had it authenticated by 3 different historical societies and 2 forensic document experts. The reports are all here. He handed her a stack of official-looking papers. Karen flipped through them, her confidence wavering. The documents were thorough, detailed, and damning. Even if this is real, she said, her voice less certain now, there's something called adverse possession. We've been living there for 20 years. 21 years, actually, Miguel corrected. But adverse possession requires that the occupation be hostile, meaning without the owner's permission. My family has been sending lease renewal notices to the HOA every year since 2003. You can't claim adverse possession when you've been formally notified of the rightful owner. Karen's stomach dropped. Those letters she'd been throwing away. They weren't scams. They were legal notices. What do you want? She asked finally. Miguel leaned back in his chair. Originally, just fair rent for the land use. The community has been essentially squatting on my property for 2 decades. I was willing to work out a reasonable lease agreement. Was willing? I've been researching your HOA, Mrs. Whitmore. The fees you charge, the fines you impose, the foreclosures you've initiated over landscaping violations. You've made millions while sitting on stolen land. Karen's face flushed. Everything I've done has been legal and for the good of the community. Legal maybe, but not ethical. Miguel stood up, his presence suddenly more intimidating. I know about the Martinez family. You foreclosed on their home because their rose bushes were the wrong shade of pink. They lost everything. They violated the covenants, Karen said defensively. They were an elderly couple on a fixed income who couldn't afford to replace healthy plants because you didn't like the color. Karen shifted uncomfortably. She remembered the Martinez case. It had been one of her prouder moments, actually, setting a precedent that no one was above the HOA rules. So what's your proposal? She asked through gritted teeth. Miguel smiled, but it wasn't friendly. That's the thing, Mrs. Whitmore. I was prepared to be reasonable, but after seeing how you've treated people, I've decided to take a different approach. Which is, you'll find out soon enough. The papers will be served tomorrow. As Karen drove away from the ranch, her hands were shaking on the steering wheel. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just walked into a trap she'd spent 20 years building for herself. Karen burst through the oak doors of Morrison Finch and Associates like a woman possessed, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. She'd barely slept, spending the night researching property law and calling in favors from every connection she'd made during her 8-year reign as HOA president. Roger, thank God you're here, she said, rushing past the receptionist toward the senior partner's office. Roger Morrison looked up from his mahogany desk, his expression grim. At 62, he'd been Karen's lawyer for every HOA battle, from petty landscaping disputes to major foreclosure proceedings. He'd never seen her rattled like this. Karen, we need to talk about the Rodriguez situation, he began, but she cut him off. I've been thinking about this all night. We can fight this. Statute of limitations, adverse possession, maybe even claim the old deed is fraudulent. There has to be something. Karen, sit down. The tone in his voice made her freeze. Roger Morrison never used that tone with her. She was his best client, bringing in over $300,000 in annual legal fees from HOA business alone. The papers were served an hour ago, he said quietly, sliding a thick manila envelope across the desk. It's worse than we thought. Karen's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The first document made her legs give out, and she collapsed into the leather chair. Eviction notice, she whispered. For the entire community? That's just the beginning. Keep reading. The second document was a bill for back rent, $2.8 million for 21 years of land use, plus interest and penalties. The third was a cease and desist order for the HOA's operations. The fourth made her blood run cold. Personal liability suit? She gasped. They're suing you personally for $5.7 million, fraudulent conversion of rent payments. Roger explained. Rodriguez's legal team is arguing that you knowingly collected HOA fees and used them for community improvements on stolen land. Every sidewalk repair, every landscaping project, every amenity you've added. They're claiming it was done with the knowledge that you were trespassing. Karen's vision blurred. But I didn't know. I thought those letters were scams. Can you prove that? Did you keep any of the letters? Did you research the claims? Did you consult with legal counsel about them? Karen's silence was answer enough. She'd thrown away every letter, dismissed every attempt at communication, and never once questioned her own authority. There's more, Roger continued. They filed a formal complaint with the state HOA regulatory board. They're seeking to have your HOA license revoked and you personally banned from serving on any homeowners association board in the state. They can't do that, Karen said weakly. Actually, they can, and based on the documentation they've provided, they have a very strong case. Karen stared at the papers scattered across the desk. 21 years of building her reputation, her power, her legacy, and it was all crumbling because of some rancher she'd never bothered to take seriously. What are our options? She asked finally. Roger removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Honestly, not many. Their legal team is first-rate. They've dotted every I and crossed every T. The best we can hope for is to negotiate a settlement that doesn't leave you personally bankrupt. Settlement? Karen's voice rose. I don't settle. I win. Karen, you need to understand something. This isn't some homeowner you can intimidate with violation notices. Miguel Rodriguez isn't just a rancher. He's a Stanford-educated attorney who left a successful practice in San Francisco to run his family's ranch. His legal team includes 2 former federal prosecutors and a property law specialist who's never lost a case. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She'd walked into that ranch expecting to intimidate a simple farmer, but she'd actually been facing off against someone who could match her move for move. How long do we have? She asked. 30 days to respond to the eviction notice. The personal lawsuit has a court date set for next month. Karen stood up on shaking legs. I need to call an emergency HOA board meeting. The community needs to know what's happening. Karen, Roger said gently, you might want to consider stepping down as president. If the other board members distance themselves from your decisions, they might be able to negotiate better terms. Karen whirled around, her eyes blazing. Step down? After everything I've done for that community? I built Sunset Ridge into the most prestigious neighborhood in the county. Property values have tripled under my leadership. On stolen land, Roger reminded her quietly. I am not abandoning my community, Karen declared, marching toward the door. If Miguel Rodriguez wants a fight, he's got one. As the door slammed behind her, Roger Morrison shook his head and reached for his phone. He had a feeling he was about to lose his biggest client, one way or another. The Sunset Ridge Community Center had never seen anything like it. Every folding chair was occupied. People stood along the walls, and the overflow crowd spilled out into the hallway. The usual Tuesday night HOA meeting typically drew maybe 15 residents, mostly to complain about their neighbor's lawn care. Tonight, 847 homeowners had shown up, and they were furious. Karen stood at the podium, her usual commanding presence somewhat diminished by the hostile energy radiating from the crowd. She'd spent the morning crafting her speech, practicing her talking points, preparing to rally her community against the external threat. What she hadn't prepared for was the open rebellion brewing in her own kingdom. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice amplified by the microphone. I know you're all concerned about the recent legal challenge to our community. Concerned? Ted Morrison jumped to his feet, his face red with anger. Karen, my wife and I have our entire retirement savings tied up in this house. Are you telling us we might lose everything because you couldn't be bothered to read your mail? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen felt her carefully prepared speech crumbling. Mr. Morrison, I understand your frustration, but we need to present a united front. This Rodriguez person is trying to extort money from our community, and we cannot extort? Sarah Henderson stood up, her voice shaking with rage. I've been doing research all week, Karen. Miguel Rodriguez has been trying to contact us for 21 years. 21 years of letters that you threw in the trash. The crowd erupted. Voices rose from every corner of the room. You've bankrupted our HOA with your legal fees. What about the Martinez family you foreclosed on? You charged us $50,000 for new playground equipment on land we don't even own. Karen banged the gavel, but the sound was lost in the chaos. She watched her carefully constructed authority dissolve before her eyes. Enough, she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. The room fell silent, but the hostility remained. I have spent 8 years of my life making this community the envy of the county. Property values have increased 300% under my leadership. Every decision I made was for the good of Sunset Ridge. For the good of your ego, called out Janet Phillips from the back of the room. You sued the Hendersons because their mailbox was 6 inches too tall. You fined the Johnsons $500 because their Halloween decorations were up 2 days too long. You've been a tyrant. Karen's face flushed crimson. Those were covenant violations. Rules exist for a reason. Rules you made up as you went along, Ted Morrison interjected. I've been reviewing the original HOA covenants from 2003. Half the violations you've issued were for rules that don't even exist in our actual agreements. The crowd turned to stare at Karen, and she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Doubt. Had she been making up rules? The lines between the official covenants and her own personal preferences had blurred over the years. I want your resignation, Sarah Henderson declared, tonight, and I want you to personally pay for the legal mess you've created. Seconded, called out multiple voices. I am not resigning, Karen said, her voice dangerously quiet. I am the elected president of this HOA, and I will not abandon my community in its time of need. Your community? Ted Morrison laughed bitterly. Karen, you are the reason we're in this mess. Your arrogance, your refusal to listen to anyone, your complete disregard for anyone's opinion but your own. You've destroyed everything. Karen looked out at the sea of angry faces, people she'd controlled, intimidated, and ruled over for nearly a decade. They were looking at her now like she was the enemy, not their protector. Fine, she said, her voice cold as ice. If that's how you feel, then you can handle this crisis yourselves. But don't come crying to me when Rodriguez takes everything you own. She gathered her papers and walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the tile floor. But as she reached the exit, she turned back to face the crowd. You'll be back, she said with a bitter smile. When the eviction notices come, when the lawsuits start flying, when you realize you're in over your heads, you'll come begging me to fix this mess. And maybe, just maybe, I'll consider it. The door slammed behind her, leaving 847 homeowners to contemplate the ruins of their American dream. Outside in the parking lot, Karen sat in her BMW, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Through the community center windows, she could see the meeting continuing. Without her. For the first time in 8 years, Sunset Ridge was operating without her control. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Her phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news about the HOA meeting. Ready to talk yet? Miguel Rodriguez. Karen stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. She wasn't ready to surrender, not yet. But as she drove home through the pristine streets of her crumbling empire, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to lose everything she'd spent her life building. Karen's home office looked like a war room. Legal documents covered every surface. Her laptop screen displayed property records dating back to the 1800s. Her whiteboard was filled with names, dates, and legal strategies, connected by red string like something out of a conspiracy thriller. She'd been working for 3 days straight, surviving on coffee and sheer determination. If Miguel Rodriguez thought he could destroy her life's work, he was about to learn otherwise. Her phone rang, the direct line that only her inner circle knew. Karen smiled. Jennifer, please tell me you have good news, she said, answering the call. Jennifer Walsh was a private investigator who specialized in finding dirt on people who crossed Karen's path. Over the years, she had helped Karen build files on troublesome homeowners gathering ammunition for everything from covenant violations to character assassination. "Oh, I have news," Jennifer said. "Your boy Miguel Rodriguez isn't as clean as he pretends to be." Karen sat up straighter. "Talk to me." "First, the ranch isn't as financially stable as it appears. Rodriguez has been struggling with debt for the past 5 years. Drought conditions, cattle disease, medical bills for his father, the works. He's mortgaged the property 3 times over." "How much debt?" "About 12 million, spread across 4 different lenders. The ranch is his only major asset, and he's been desperately looking for ways to generate income." Karen's mind raced. "So this lawsuit isn't about justice, it's about money." "Gets better," Jennifer said. "I dug into his background in San Francisco. Turns out he didn't leave his law practice voluntarily. He was facing a malpractice suit from a client who claimed Rodriguez deliberately tanked a case to benefit his own interests. The suit was settled out of court, but Rodriguez's reputation was destroyed." "Malpractice," Karen whispered, a slow smile forming. "What kind of malpractice?" "Real estate law. He was representing a group of homeowners in a property dispute and allegedly made a deal with the opposing party behind his clients' backs. They lost their homes. Rodriguez walked away with a settlement, and 6 months later, he was back in California running Daddy's ranch." Karen's heart pounded. "Jennifer, please tell me you have documentation." "Everything, court records, witness statements, financial records showing the settlement payment. I even found 3 former clients willing to go on record about Rodriguez's questionable ethics." Karen was already pulling up her contact list. "Send me everything tonight." "Karen, be careful. If Rodriguez finds out you're investigating him—" "Let him find out," Karen interrupted. "I'm done playing defense." The next morning, Karen called her lawyer. "Roger, I need you to file a countersuit against Miguel Rodriguez. Malicious prosecution, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, everything." "Karen, that's not a good strategy. We're already in a weak position." "Just listen. Rodriguez isn't the victim he's pretending to be. He's a disgraced lawyer who destroyed his clients' lives for personal gain. I have proof." She laid it all out, and Roger's tone shifted from doubt to interest. "If this is true," he said slowly, "we might be able to argue that his claims against the HOA are part of a pattern of fraudulent behavior." "Exactly. And there's more. The ranch is drowning in debt. This lawsuit isn't about protecting his family's legacy. It's a desperate cash grab." "I'll need to verify these claims independently," Roger said. "But if they check out, we could have grounds for a RICO claim, conspiracy to defraud using the legal system." "How long?" "Give me a week to investigate and file the countersuit." 3 days later, the courthouse steps were swarming with reporters and cameras. Karen had leaked details about Miguel's past to every media outlet she could find. She walked through the crowd, flanked by Roger on one side and Jennifer on the other. Behind them, a few loyal Sunset Ridge residents still clung to her leadership. Inside the courtroom, she felt a surge of satisfaction when she saw Miguel Rodriguez looking tired and cornered. His legal team was small, just 2 attorneys, compared to her 5. Roger delivered a brilliant opening. He detailed Miguel's malpractice case, the debt, the shady settlement. Karen watched as the judge's face darkened. But when Miguel's attorney, David Chen, stood, the tone of the room changed. "Your Honor," Chen began, "Mrs. Whitmore's countersuit is an impressive piece of character assassination. But it has one fatal flaw. It's irrelevant to the facts of this case." He held up the deed. "The Rodriguez family has owned this land since 1887. That's not disputed. The HOA received 21 years of lease notices and ignored them. That's not opinion. That's fact." Karen shifted in her seat. "And while Mrs. Whitmore investigated my client's past, we did some investigating of our own into her finances." Karen's blood ran cold. "It appears Mrs. Whitmore has been overcharging Sunset Ridge homeowners for years, collecting nearly $2 million in excess fees, which were transferred to an account only she controlled." The courtroom exploded. Karen jumped to her feet. "That's a lie!" "Order!" The judge banged her gavel. "Mrs. Whitmore, sit down." Chen continued. "We have bank records. We have transfers. We have proof that she treated the HOA like her personal piggy bank. Karen's vision blurred. She had planned to return the money, eventually, but through the lens of law, it looked exactly like what it was: embezzlement. The judge recessed for 30 minutes, but the damage was done. When court resumed, the ruling was swift and devastating. Miguel Rodriguez won on all points. The HOA was ordered to pay $2.8 million in a back rent. The residents had 90 days to negotiate a new lease. And Karen? She was referred to the district attorney for criminal charges. When she returned to Sunset Ridge, a crowd had gathered at the gate, people she once ruled over, now holding signs that read, "Prosecute HOA fraud." Karen lied. Rodriguez was right. She rolled her window down an inch. "I need to get to my house." "Your house?" Sarah Henderson laughed. "You mean the one paid for with our stolen fees? The one that sits on land you knew we didn't own?" Ted Morrison stepped forward. "You're not getting in, Karen." Then Miguel appeared, holding a legal document. "Effective immediately, you're banned from Sunset Ridge property. Trespassing charges will be filed if you enter. Your house has been seized as collateral. The locks have been changed." Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't do that." "Actually, we can," Miguel said calmly, "and the police agree." 2 cop cars pulled up behind her. "Mrs. Whitmore," said Detective Lisa Park, stepping out, "I have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy." As the crowd fell silent, Karen was cuffed and led to the squad car. She turned back one last time. "This isn't over." Miguel nodded. "You're right. It's not. Tomorrow I meet with the new HOA board. This time the community will be run by people who care." 3 months later, Karen sat in her court-appointed lawyer's office. She signed a plea deal that would send her to prison for 2 years. Her house was sold, the money returned, her reputation gone. And as she sat back, her lawyer handed her a copy of the HOA newsletter. She smiled. They were fighting over mailbox colors again. Some battles, it seemed, never ended.